UFO Case by Christopher Sheerin. Hold on one second. Let me just adjust my screen. Throughout the 20th century, the residents of New York's Hudson Valley have experienced strange aerial phenomena, including unusual lights in the night sky. These remain unexplained to this day. The sightings reached an all-time high in the 1980s, which is when this story is set. While the observations of these phenomena are real, the characters and story presented here are fictional. Scene 1, interior FBI office, an early autumn day in 1984. Bob Beckett and Susan Clancy, two fairly young special agents, have been called in by their boss, lead agent Ted Smith.
Agents Beckett and Clancy, I'm sending you to conduct an investigation in the Hudson Valley of New York State. This is the very area you grew up in, Agent Beckett. Westchester County in particular has had tremendous number of sightings, stretching from White Plains up to Yorktown, though not as large a number as what we experienced in your hometown of Oak Bush. There have been some strange occurrences there, and folks are saying the whole area is under what has been called a night siege. On a nightly basis, people are reporting lights in the sky and aircraft so large that they dwarf 747s and are many times the size of a football field, and they're dead silent.
We'll probably find it to be nothing more than some trickster pilots with very little to do on a Saturday night, tooling around in ultralights or whatever they fly up there.
That's ridiculous, Clancy. A flight of ultralights would sound like a fleet of lawnmowers overhead. Furthermore, it's strictly illegal to fly ultralights at night. I can't see a group of amateurs risking their pilot's license over such a silly prank, unless someone or something was behind this. As Agent Smith said, there are reports of dead, silent aircraft. They undoubtedly use some sort of high-tech electromagnetic propulsion, far surpassing any internal combustion type of engine. Who or whatever is piloting these things knows what they're doing and has some sort of agenda.
Now, Beckett, we can't jump to conclusions here. We have to maintain a scientific attitude and cool head about these things.
My point exactly, Clancy. If you want to check the history, you will see almost a whole century's worth of sightings of Westchester and the Hudson Valley, going as far back as 1908. Whatever people saw at this time certainly wasn't the work of the Wright brothers or Tesla or Thomas Edison.
You two can debate this more when you're in the field. For now, I want to fill you in on some of the authors and scientists working the case. One is someone you may know, a man who is more schooled in the field of UFOs than any other American scientist, Dr. H. Robert Anik.
I sure do know of him. My dad knew him well back in the 50s. He is hands down the best astronomer in the nation, with gigs from Harvard to Stanford. He's the author of scores of books and the founder of the Greater Chicago Observatory. I loved seeing him in that cameo we did in that movie, The Great Encounter. This is someone I really want to speak to.
Sounds like a waste of talent to me.
Or a great application of talent to a new field.
The other scientist is Emmett Brockman.
Can't say I know him.
He's a lesser-known scientist. Many say he's just Anik's lackey. Supposedly was a big Vietnam War hero and medic, or at least that's what he claims. His educational credentials appear to be a bit dubious. Nobody seems to know exactly where he studied or just where he came from. He teaches at a local high school named Wilson Prep. They should know something. And there's a former student of his named Keith Sheridan in the area who knew him since childhood and still keeps in touch. So there may be some validity to his perspective. You can reach out to him as well. And was a regular at a biker bar and grill that had a slight paranormal theme to it. You might want to check that out.
Yes, I know the place well from in the area.
Have a good time with this one, even if it turns out to just be swamp gas, as they say.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Beckett, do you remember the gas released by the hallucinogenic fungus on that case we worked in the South?
How could I ever forget that case? The point is, there's none of that type of vegetation or climate in the Hudson Valley, so the swamp gas hypothesis is ridiculous.
I suspect this will be a different case than that one.
Yes, for one, the people of the Hudson Valley are sophisticated and cosmopolitan, living only 45 miles from Midtown Manhattan. They're hardly the type of people to be taken in by UFO hysteria.
Well, I guess everyone can fall for something.
Get on the case and get back to me when you know something.
Scene 2, interior, an office in a very remote underground location. We see a man puffing on a cigarette. Much like Emperor Palpatine in Star Wars, he appears very worn and very sinister. A young and agitated agent walks in.
Mr. Wentworth?
Well, I prefer that to some of the damn names that Beckett has for me.
Smith sent Beckett and Clancy into the field.
Yes, I know.
But what about our underground base in the Hudson Fields and the aircraft we've launched from there? That could be all in jeopardy now.
Yes, we have to protect something like that very well. In the past, we would do flights like this out of Area 51 with just miles of empty Nevada desert to fly over. But in the Hudson Valley, we had no choice. Only that area has the correct geochemical balance for the special propulsion that we need. Never before have we done this level of reverse engineering. So people inevitably will see things, and we're going to have to concoct some very good stories to cover our asses.
We've hired some hoaxer ultralight pilots to do some night flights out of the Storm River Airport. That ought to confuse people into accepting a more earthly explanation for the time being.
Excellent. Well, this should be no harder to cover up than the assassinations we've done overseas. Well, not to mention the domestic ones. Yes, granted, this base and the mission itself is a bit more sophisticated than our usual messy work, but it's nothing we can't handle. As far the outside scientists observing this whole thing, at least one is a complete buffoon.
But that's not the case with Anik.
Well, if it would make you feel any better, put a tail on those two agents, although I doubt it'll get out of hand. I try not to let emotion get in the way of these things, but I have to admit, I especially don't like that guy, Beckett.
I know what you mean, sir. The young agent will...
Young agent walks out, end of scene. Scene 3, Beckett and Clancy are driving along the Taconic State Parkway. It is very late at night, and there are very few other cars on the road.
Well, this is Clancy, the Hudson Valley of New York State. This is where I grew up. I loved the whole valley in those days when I took long weekend rides with my father. But Westchester County always had a special place in my heart. It will be a while before we hit Oak Bush, so just enjoy the ride. We are literally driving through history here, from the first American Indians to inhabit the area to the days of the American Revolution. Some dark history here, from the capture and execution of Major John Andre, to the Son of Sam killings just a few years ago, to the human polio experiments in Lethbridge Village, which were done on children against their will, to the mysterious castle on Bannerman Island, to the unexplained wanderings of the Leatherman in the 1800s, and to all the stories of Sing Sing prison.
A lot of places have negative pasts.
But this place has a special history to it from before the colonial era. That is why the area is so rich in folklore. From Indian legends to Sleepy Hollow to the whole West Point history, it all fits in. When I was growing up around here, my friends and I would sneak into these stone chamber type of buildings in the woods at night. They were built very long ago and is not known exactly when or by whom. At first, the thrill of being there was pretty much just the rush you get being somewhere you're not supposed to be. But it turned out to be more than that. They had a weird energy to them that is difficult to explain.
That could all be in your head, Beckett.
No, there's more to it than that. Stories surrounding this place are more than tall tales and suburban legend. They reflect the whole character of the region. Okay, the road winds around. Darker here.
Road winds around. It is darker here, and the terrain looks more like the Badlands of the Dakotas than the New York suburbs. Suddenly, they pass a cross erected at the side of the road.
Must have been a bad accident here.
Now, that is what I mean, Clancy. For all your skepticism, you still cling to organized religion. You're a scientist, but insist on being in church every major holiday of any importance to Holy Mother Church. Can't you see that such a rigid system makes you less sensitive and flexible when dealing with the unknown?
Beckett, traditional spirituality for thousands of years has helped people more than any of your tales of ghosts or Bigfoot or flying saucers.
And talk of angels and demons and prophets who have a direct wire to God serve us any better? The point, Clancy, is that all this was experienced thousands of years ago. before there was any modern science. What we're about to study is a very modern phenomenon and no doubt a technological one.
My point, Beckett, is that I simply separate my private faith and spirituality from my work. Perhaps you should do the same.
Touche.
Just as they are driving along, a late night show pops up on the radio. An announcer loudly states, throughout the valley and much of the state, people are again experiencing unusual lights in the sky.
That was weird. My hand was nowhere near the radio. Seems like just turned itself on.
Clancy goes to shut the radio off, but Beckett stops her.
No, this is important. It just might help our case.
The announcer goes on in a sensational tone, hyping the story. And the valley hasn't seen anything like this before. Is the government for real on this, or is there a conspiracy behind it? In an odd twist the other day, researcher Emmett Brockman blamed lawyers for much of the cover-up, saying the legal profession is worse than politicians or government agencies when it comes to perpetrating the highest levels of conspiracy. Well, that's a mouthful. Now a word from our sponsor.
This guy Brockman sounds a bit odd, but at least he's right about the legal profession.
It's a surprise what you find on late night radio.
I know, isn't it wild? I can't think of a better way to pass the time.
Will you have a career on the radio after retiring from the Bureau?
I can think of worse ways to settle down. Heck, I sure would have some good stories to tell, like the time when...
Just then, the car sputters and begins to stall out. Despite Beckett's attempts to continue driving, they come to a stop on the empty and rather dark Taconic Parkway. They quickly exit the vehicle, and just as they do, a gigantic light beams down. It is from a multicolored boomerang-shaped craft, several football fields wide and less than 100 feet overhead. They just stand spellbound, looking at the gigantic craft, which emits no noise whatsoever. Then, just as mysteriously as it appeared, it eerily begins to slowly move away. The car's lights come on again. Beckett and Clancy slowly regain their wits.
Ultralights, Clancy, or swamp gas?
Don't be an ass, Beckett. That was not the size of a football field. It was more the size of a football stadium. You know, I never thought I would say this, but it seemed to know what we were thinking and why we were here.
Welcome to my world, Clancy. But yes, you are entirely right, and I know what you're saying. Come on, let's get you to the hotel. You need some sleep. As for me, I need a drink, and I know exactly where to go for it.
Scene 4, interior, Biggie's bar. Beckett walks into the establishment. The crowd is left due to the late hour. It is primarily a biker place with a few seasonal Halloween decorations on the wall. There was a loud roaring of motorcycles coming from outside the establishment. At the bar, there is a bartender, a burly, bearded biker type with a Vietnam vet tattoo. He looks threatening, but seems affable enough. This is me, Chris.
That's you. Yeah,
Okay.
you're a biker today.
Welcome to Biggie's, best biker bar in the Hudson Valley. What can I get for you, buddy?
Coldest beer that you have and whatever burger you recommend.
Coming right up. Say, I haven't seen you in here lately. Did you go to Oak Bush High School a number of years ago?
I sure did.
Are you Bob Beckett?
In the flesh, and I remember you as well, Jack.
As I live and breathe. Yeah, I remember you from the winter when we won the big hockey tournament and got that nice road trip up to Lake Placid.
Those were the days.
After that, you left town for college to follow in your father's footsteps, and we figured we wouldn't see you again. Other than you, though, it's mostly been the same crowd here since high school. But after all the weird stuff that's been going on around here, I figured someone would be here to investigate.
My life is a little boring office work. How have you been?
I split my time between here and the motorcycle dealership. The bike shop always helps clear my head. Feel free to drop by there, as we still have that mean rocket fuel coffee.
Yeah, I remember your dad's recipe for that. We almost blew up the place once trying to make it. In fact, I think that would put hair on the chest of my partner.
Right after high school, I got drafted to go to NAM, and I wound up being sent into combat. Man, those were hard times. Like Kassan and those missions we did behind enemy lines deep into the north, not something I talk about much, but will always remember.
I can imagine. But on the subject of people who say they've been in the service, is there a guy who comes in here named Emmett Brockman?
Ha, that nerd. Yeah, he hasn't been here in a while since he started hanging out with that big time scientist. But he was a regular here back in the day. And man, was he full of it. He's sort of like one of those lion braggart kids we knew from elementary school, but now they're all grown up.
Yeah, I remember runts like that. But did Brockman tell any specific lies you know of underneath all the bluster?
Sure, like that crap that he was an Air Force medic who served in the Army and vice versa. Marines use Navy medics, but that doesn't happen in the other branches. Any smart guy would have thought to research that first. He also speaks of suicide missions that never happened in areas where we never did that type of mission. I doubt if he ever served, but if he did, I'm sure it was stateside.
So was it just war stories that he told?
Nah, there was other stuff too, like conspiracies that only he knew the answer to, like underground bases in the area and all of that. And all this before he even had a drink. He talked about having degrees from major colleges too. Now, I'm not a big school guy myself, so I don't know anything about that, but the war stories are definitely horse shit. That's you, Chris.
Yeah, that's why I said, don't tell me the audacity to come by your
I
bike
missed
shop.
it, sorry. He actually did. He was there to freeload at my grand opening party without buying even a single item in the store. Talked about owning a fat boy, but no one ever saw it. Yeah, right. Maybe it was invisible, like all of his magical BS. And he talked about riding his make-believe bike to Upper New England where there are no helmet laws. Please, that lion loser will be lucky to handle a toddler's tricycle.
This town has gotten more interesting in the time since I left.
Sure has. We've been in the news a lot lately, and the publicity has been a mix of good and bad for us. But I think we'll pull through.
So do you think what people are seeing here is real, or are they just lunatics howling at the moon?
Heck, I don't know. But if it brings business in, they can howl all they want. Like some people think this very bar we are in is haunted. I haven't seen anything yet, but I'll keep my eyes open.
Good advice.
But that's all I know for now. Your burger is here, and I know you'll love it. It's upstate beef, top grade bacon, Wisconsin cheddar, and a pinch of rosemary.
Sounds awesome.
I'll let you enjoy it while I clean up before I close up shop. Definitely stop by the store before you go back.
Will do.
Lights fade. Scene 5, Wilson Preparatory School, principal's office. The principal is a woman about a decade older than Clancy.
Hello, Agent Clancy.
That's Nina.
Welcome to Wilson Prep. I'm school principal, Lisa Page.
They sit down.
Thanks for having me. I would love to hear your thoughts on everything, and I'd like to speak to Dr. Brockman if possible.
Dr. Brockman has been out of school the last few days. He is out in the field working with Dr. Anik on that Evening Invasion book.
Principal Page, is it typical for high school teachers to take off days like that unless they're sick? I presume this isn't like a college where teachers can go on sabbaticals to do research.
No, but we try to accommodate our faculty the best we can. And to be honest, Agent Clancy, a best-selling blockbuster book could put us on the map as one of the most prestigious schools in the Northeast. I can't lie about that.
Yes, I bet you'd love that. But is that generally how things work here? I seem to remember that some negative reports on the school appeared in the newspapers in past years.
We have improved our discipline situation immensely, and academically, we are becoming one of the best schools in the area, winning a major science award. We threw a miscreant kid out for bringing in a butterfly knife 3 years ago, but never had an incident with guns. Any high school has marijuana, but we haven't had much of a problem with hard drugs in quite a while.
It was in the news quite a bit when 2 of your students died cutting through Central Park a few years back.
Yes, that was a major tragedy and embarrassment for the school, but that was a case of young and dumb that could have happened anywhere. They were warned by their peers earlier in the evening not to go in, but they insisted on doing it anyway. They got very high and drunk and then attempted to swim the lake there in complete darkness on a spring evening with cooler temperatures. Something bad was bound to happen, but that was before I was even here.
That was certainly tragic. I'm sorry, but I would like to ask about something else. What does this Dr. Brockman have his doctorate in, and from where?
He says it was MIT and in theoretical science history.
Theoretical science history? I have worked in the sciences for years and I have not heard of that. Did you research that further?
This is a top author working with an eminent scientist. Why would he lie?
I don't really know.
Look, to be honest with you, I find Brockman to be eccentric and a bit paranoid. Some of the kids remark at his rather odd conspiracy theories and his tall tales. But he keeps the students busy, and this book is going to do the school wonders in terms of fundraising.
I'm sure it will.
Is there anything else I can get for you, Agent?
A good strong cup of coffee would do me well. It was a long ride up.
We only have herbal tea in the office, but if you go outside, our lunch truck man has a real powerful brew.
Thank you.
Outside the school, Clancy approaches the school lunch truck and spots a middle-aged man finishing up. The lunch hour is over now. Students have left the area and returned to their classes.
I haven't seen you before. What can I do for you, lady?
Meatball hero, fries, and an extra large black coffee. I'm starving.
Ha! Now that's the kind of order I like to get. But don't get too often anymore. I used to have hungry teenagers buying huge orders of stuff, but then that's SOB Brockman cut into my business.
Cut into your business? How?
Schmuck. Come out here and he yells at students, only one cookie, only half a sandwich, only one slice of pizza. He acts as if the food was a leading cause of death for people. He said kids like to eat because part of them want to be fat. Ever hear garbage like that? Then once this nutcase joked about eating raw meat. Geez, they have him around kids. I told him to get lost and spoke with the principal about it. But the damage was done. Man, I just wish that one of Brockman's damn UFOs would take him away for good.
Warm weather cold until summer comes, because we never know.
7,
Okay.
hotel room. Beckett is on the phone.
Hello, Gateman. How's my favorite tech-savvy conspiracy theorist? Did I cast that?
No, you want
How about Rachel read?
Hmm.
How about Rachel read that role?
Okay, what am I reading, Gateman?
Yes.
Just peachy, Beckett. I bet you got your hands full in the Hudson Valley.
Sure do. That is why I'm counting on your research.
Well, Beckett, as much as we have hit the mainframe, I'm sad to say we have no dirt on this Brockman dude at all. Nothing on his childhood, his school years. It's like he didn't exist before he taught at Wilson Prep.
Wow, a stalwart like you can't find much. I doubt anyone will.
Well, Beckett, we did find some of his writings early in his career, and get this, his ideas are even weirder than mine are.
I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah, in addition to his unrealistic braggart routine, he believes in more than just UFO stuff. He had some writings on genies from parallel dimensions crossing into our world. He even claimed that post-Vietnam, he was on some sort of joint mission to capture one. Are you seriously telling me that this guy is the main partner for that brainiac, Dr. Anik?
That's what I'm telling you. And that's why I took a 400-mile road trip. Doesn't make much sense, does it?
Not at all, as my searches keep finding some kind of coded messages for a secret underground base in the area. That doesn't make sense for the Hudson Valley. This could very well go up to, dare I say it, Wentworth?
That's what I'm afraid of.
Anyway, I'll keep my ear to the electronic grindstone and let you know if anything else pops up.
Au revoir.
Clancy walks into the room.
Any luck with that small but fancy prep school?
None. The people there don't seem to care about anything other than good PR and the bottom line. They were completely disingenuous on the credentials issue.
Gateman told me a bit more, but it adds up even less. Come on, let's talk to that old student of his.
Scene 8. Beckett and Clancy observe Keith Sheridan walking in the street. He is a longtime student of Brockman's. He is a tall, good-looking man in his early 20s. They take out badges and ask to speak with him.
Excuse me, would you be Keith Sheridan?
Yes, I am. Am I in some kind of trouble?
Not at all. We would just like your thoughts on your old teacher, Emmett Brockman.
Wow, you guys are in for a treat if you came all this way just to investigate him. What do you want to know?
Right from the beginning.
I was one of the few Wilson students that went from K to 12. A lot were there a year or less, and the very few I still keep in touch with nowadays. So yes, I knew him a lot longer than the other students did.
Any general impressions that stick out?
His electricity was off the charts. He would brandish this thick yardstick like a samurai sword and act like he would use it. He even said he would use it to execute us if we didn't do well in the exams. But mostly I remember how for a guy who was supposed to be teaching science, he would just spend the class bragging and telling tall tales. Mostly he spoke of Vietnam, said he volunteered as opposed to being drafted. Who knows? But all the stories he told put together can't be true. Medic for all the different branches and all.
Any particular stories stand out?
Yeah, like secret missions as far as China and Russia. One time he said he came across a pizzeria in the middle of the jungle of all places, which he robbed to feed himself. Like he would be telling that to teens if he actually did that. Then there was all this talk about working for top secret paramilitary organizations and that he was a soldier of fortune. Yeah, a soldier of fortune. I figured it would be pretty laughable seeing him as an extra in the A team on a Tuesday night.
Beckett chuckles at this, but Clancy is serious.
Did he ever talk about his educational background?
Hardly ever. When asked where he went to college, he would say, the School of Hard Knocks. A few times he might ramble on about doing some studies in Texas or some other states after the war, but it always came back to that hard knocks track. That is why I find it hard to believe all this about him getting advanced theoretical degrees, like he said on TV. He also said he was a high-ranked college wrestler in one of the lower weight classes. Pretty unathletic guy to make that type of claim.
Big imagination, it sounds like.
It gets worse. It became apparent that he took his sci-fi a bit too seriously, and he was watching way too much Dr. Who. Said he was a Time Lord, and that he was really 500 years old. Said he was in control of a whole super mega cluster of stars. Yeah, see, he said that with a straight face while teaching at Wilson Prep.
Why was this guy entrusted with the well-being of minors?
You'll have to ask Wilson Prep about that. Anyway, I just think it's sad that a high school teacher is so bored with his life that he has to create some sort of Indiana Jones alter ego for himself. He would drive this little beat up car to school, but bragged about having a Harley that he would tour the country with. Not only did he never bring the bike to school, he never produced a picture of it.
Did the man have any family that you knew of?
Oh, that's another story. When my friend asked him once in a dare if he was married, he screamed, "You are being intrusive and offensively forward." Geez, he couldn't manage a simple yes or no like any other teacher. Then there was this rumor early on that he had a teenage daughter, but that was as unsubstantiated as the Harley Fat Boy. Around my sophomore year, he showed us a picture of a baby saying it was his son. Then he clammed up when we hit him with questions about who the mom was. Like he expected us not to ask something after doing the whole father routine.
Did he express any radical ideas on politics?
Oh yeah. HIV came on the scene when I was a student in the late 70s. He said the US government created it to kill off their own population. He seemed to sympathize with Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran and Gaddafi and the Libyan terrorists as well. Also said that blind spots exist in cars to intentionally cause accidents. Something about it would keep cash flowing through the medical establishment while the auto industry gets paid off. That's why I don't believe this, along with the veteran stories. Telling tales like that would just get him punched out at a veterans gathering.
Did he run any extracurricular activities at school?
Oh yes, he ran a meteorology club, and he could be quite strange there as well. I remember at the time, I told one of the younger, more impressionable kids that he was a storyteller. I even said that he'd been inhaling too many vapors in the chemistry lab, and he would soon see why. The kid told Brookman, and for this he banned me from club activities for a few weeks. Broke my heart. He really didn't like it when people came too close to the truth.
So was he at least a big one for extracurricular activities?
Oh, not really. Well, we put on this play every spring at a retirement home off campus. I had a lead role in a few of them. We were doing Faust one year, which in fact was a favorite of Brookman's. When my buddy enthusiastically invited him to see a Friday evening performance, Brookman only replied, "I'm doing my laundry that night." Good guy, huh?
Sounds like he was extremely insulting on a regular basis.
Yeah. Once a student told him he reminded him of a tech school guy he saw in a local commercial. The guy was just an early middle-aged man, and there was a slight resemblance. Brookman only said, "You remind me of a gorilla I saw at the zoo." Funny when your teacher's comeback is worse than a first grader's.
You won a few history awards at the time.
Oh, yes, it's probably my favorite subject. But when I got the first one, they told Brookman about speaking about Vietnam before the class. We were instructed in advance not to ask questions we were instructed in advance not to ask questions because of opening emotional scars. Such BS.
Was he known for kind of wrapping himself in an aura of secrecy?
Very much so. He bragged that the school did not even have his telephone number. My question to that was, how do you know about snow days? I probably had to stay after school for that one too.
Do you have any contact with him after graduation?
Oh, once. I'm not sure if you know, but the area has a midnight local radio show which deals with unusual topics.
Yes, my partner and I stumbled on it a few nights ago.
The subject was subterranean structures, and he was talking about tunnels underneath New York State, which he personally toured. Anyway, I called in saying he forgot the most important tunnel in the state, that as a student, I tried to tunnel out of his classroom. Yeah, the host thought it was hilarious. She said, "Boy, do we have dirt on you, Emmett." But as far as Brookman, I'm sure that steam was coming out of his ears. He bragged about the underground things a lot and said he was trapped under rocks. All BS. There are plenty of cave networks that run through the area, but Brookman never led a tour to any of them. I remember how in that show he went on about an underground river that ran red with clay deep in the earth. It was something one just had to see. When a caller asked him about visiting it, he conveniently said, "You don't want to go down there." Big surprise, huh?
Did he bring back any evidence of these travels?
For sure. He showed a photo of what he said was a ghost, and I said, "No, that's a shadow." I think he gave me a demur for that.
You said earlier that you don't often speak to your old classmates, but do you have any idea if they feel the same way about him?
About 2 years ago, we had a little makeshift reunion at Biggie's bar. It was before many had left the area. After a few beers, some tempers flared. No fist, mind you, just some arguing. Well, I argued what a con artist he was, and a clown or two said that he was still their favorite. One native girl said she screamed with joy when he did TV appearances. The evening didn't end on a very pleasant note, but as you can see, I'm glad I don't see them anymore.
Sometimes it's best to go your separate ways.
Yeah, just about all my classmates moved out of the Hudson Valley. Many of them went to the city and some clear across the country. But truth be told, I'm happy working for the fire department in this one-horse town. I could never handle the crowds and congestion of the big city. The skies are clear for telescope use, and believe it or not, I still like astronomy despite having such a horrible teacher. And of course, for now, where else would I rather be with all the interesting publicity we are getting, with the press treating us like we were some kind of extraterrestrial hub? You can't get that kind of excitement anywhere else. And I don't mind Dr. Anik coming to town, a celebrity scientist we all know from the movie The Great Encounter. Why he got involved with all this Brookman crap, I will never figure out. Brookman was simultaneously a joke and a disgrace to the school.
Okay, this is important. Did he in any way ever lead you to think he might be armed and dangerous?
Yes, he bragged about having a handgun, though obviously said nothing about the licensing process. Perhaps a leftover from his supposed war. Funny thing, he said he was not a hunter. Yet he took the gun with him on trips upstate because he didn't know what he would be running into. Where the hell was he headed? The OK Corral?
And did he ever threaten any of you personally?
Yes, a fight once broke out in a science room of all places. He told the students if it happened again, he would literally break their necks and show them what real fighting was all about.
Jesus.
I know this is tough, but what was the strangest thing he ever said?
He said there was an interdimensional portal in the hills near here by the stone chambers and some kind of pace under there. He talked about Area 51 in Nevada, but he acted like he was the only person who knew about it around here.
Any final memories to leave us with?
Yeah, the day I graduated, he actually refused to shake my hand. I brought a cigar to celebrate. It's a tradition going back to my great-grandfather. He said with an angry scowl on his face, he was going to make me eat it. I doubt he says that to Dr. Anik about consuming his pipe.
Well, thanks a lot. You've been quite informative. We'll let you know if we need anything else.
Anytime. Say, I know I'm not supposed to ask what you're investigating Brookman for, but whatever it is, why don't you do everyone a favor and throw him in the slammer?
Maybe we will.
Well, Beckett, it seems like Keith found him as strange as your friend, the bartender.
And for good reason, too. Glad I never had a teacher like that. Come on, we have the police chief next.
Beckett and Clancy are in the middle of a very busy police station where phones are ringing off the wall. Chief Cooper, a tough but amicable older man, invites them into his office.
Thanks for seeing us, Chief Cooper. But before now, did you ever have any cases that were as unusual as these UFO reports?
That's Milton.
Yes, one back in '67, right at the height of the counterculture movement comes to mind. We have a series of stone chambers in the woods a few miles outside of town. Nobody knows exactly where they date from or who built them, but we do know they are quite old. They never were designated as historic landmarks, but they should be. Anyway, at that time, a young woman named Sky Fahey and her boyfriend formed a small cult up there, which would meet very late at night. There were rumors then that small animals were sacrificed, but that can't be substantiated. We do know, however, they would even sleep in those damn chambers.
This is interesting, yeah.
Well, it gets more interesting. During one of their rituals, they ended up spray painting pagan symbols on the chambers, defacing what many people consider historic sites. Thank God we were able to clean it off. Anyway, she had this belief that if the stones in the area were put in a perfect circle, it would open what she called an interdimensional doorway, and it would release energy that could power anti-gravity devices and generate what she called antimatter. Yeah, she was a weird one. She had no job as far as we could tell. Guess she didn't have much else in her life.
Do you know what eventually happened to that group?
Fahey and a few of her followers moved out to California where they belong. They traded the Hudson Valley for the San Fernando Valley. Good riddance. Total head cases, those people.
So this cult activity dates at least back to the 1960s. Do you know if there are any reports of UFOs or such things earlier than that?
Yes, there were. My great-grandfather was a cadet at West Point in the 1890s. One night, he was out on a guard duty and saw a cigar-shaped object hundreds of feet across, hovering over the river. It just stayed there, dead silent, until finally it just took off at breakneck speed. And you sure can't blame that on hoaxers flying ultralights.
Was any record kept of this?
This was the 1890s. If he had reported it, he would have been locked up, or at least thrown out of the academy. So it remained a family secret until right now.
The phones are ringing off the walls here. Do you have a policy on dealing with callers whose claims seem unusual?
Yes, we try to handle everything with kid gloves and try not to upset anyone further. I had a talk with an officer who'd ask callers if they were high or drunk or pranksters or had psychiatric problems and so on. Being rude and patronizing like that isn't good if you want to maintain positive community relations. And as you know, it isn't good law enforcement procedure to just jump to conclusions about things we really don't have a clue on.
Yes, I agree totally. How is the town taking all this publicity and the media presence?
Well, the people do like Dr. Anik coming to town. A science celebrity like him can really put a place like Oakbush on the map. We are a one-movie theater town and not big into the sort of things that you see in sci-fi movies. But when The Great Encounter came out a few years back, the lines went down the block. You'd think that Anik was Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars with all the attention he got back then. Actually, I have that movie on VHS. I'm still watching now and then.
What about his new sidekick, Dr. Brockman?
Oh boy, that one. He was known a little bit in the Upper Valley region, even before he began at Wilson Prep down Valley a few years back. My neighbor's kid briefly went to Wilson and told me about him. He is as weird as they come. He is probably no Sky Fahey, but has been known to hang out in the Chamber region off Route 300 late at night. He was once found digging there, and he rambled on about having to find something underground. Being creepy isn't a crime, so I never arrested the guy, but it's a wonder in a way that it never came to that. And yeah, I am really surprised that a big scientist like Anik worked with him on that Evening Invasion book.
This guy Brockman is hard to locate. Do you know where to find him?
Sure, creature of habit that he is, he goes to the same place for breakfast very early on the last Sunday of the month. The guy has some weird rituals, and that's one of them. If you drive 45 minutes up the back roads north on Route 9A, you'll find the Out of the Way Diner. It's in the middle of nowhere, just as advertised, and I never eat there. Always empty, but that's got to be part of the charm for Brockman, who wants his privacy. Just horrible coffee and even more atrocious food. I've heard that he always gets the jalapeno and cheese scramble, but knowing him, I always figured he would rather eat some damn thing from his laboratory. He's quite edgy, so use caution if you approach him.
Thank you for your time.
Beckett and Clancy walk out of the police station and back towards their car. Just then, Clancy's very large cell phone rings.
Yes, thank you. We'll be there.
Good news?
We have scored the big interview. Dr. H. Robert Anik himself.
Beckett and Clancy have entered a large home in the more affluent section of Oak Bush. They have gone into an extremely plush and well-decorated living room area. A man in his mid-70s enters the room. He has a white beard and is spry and sharp for his age. As he walks around shaking hands, we hear that he is very well-spoken and has a slight Midwestern accent.
Pleasure to meet you, Dr. Anik. My father knew you from long ago.
Call me Rob. Yes, I knew your father since the early 50s when you were a toddler. He was an excellent agent, one who would listen to all sides of things and truly respected the work I do rather than ridicule it and knock it down. Say, I hope that chain-smoking creep Wentworth is no longer working in government.
I'm afraid he is.
A very dangerous man, that one. It's too bad that he's involved with any of these technologies.
Tell me about it. But that is in part why we're here, to get the whole history and scope of what's going on and to find out a lot before he does.
That sounds like a logical plan.
The group sits down.
So did you come from a family of scientists?
No, they were hardworking people from the Midwest. They were Czech immigrants. Mom was a school teacher. My dad was in the cigar business along with my maternal grandfather. Funny, I ended up a pipe smoker instead.
But did you get into astronomy when you were pretty young?
Oh, yes. I was born in Minneapolis in 1908. When I was 2, my parents took me to the roof of their apartment to see Halley's Comet. They said that was how it all started. As soon as I learned to read, I was into astronomy books and looking to make that my life's pursuit. And when I was a teenager in the mid-1920s, I was very inspired by Edwin Hubble's discovery that the Milky Way was not the entire universe, but a tiny piece in the puzzle. And that what were previously believed to be nebulas surrounding the Milky Way were in fact distant galaxies. That means a stretch of 120,000 light years containing maybe 4 billion stars is just a tiny speck in it all.
And you met a few interesting people along the way.
After getting my degrees, I worked at the Yerkes Observatory with the Great Lakes region in north of Chicago. Some of the best years of my life were spent spending those cold evenings there under the stars and staring at the wonders of the universe. I worked with Donald Metzel, who was really our nation's first astrophysicist. And I never will forget Clyde Tombaugh, who discovered Pluto. Quite a character, that one. It really hit him being one to discover a new planet at so young an age, and doing it after nearly a century had gone by since the last planet discovery.
But this was all pre-World War II, and if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't until after that when your UFO research began. Is that right?
Oh, yes. During World War II, I worked on fused technology. not the best of years for anyone, but the UFO thing took off in 1947. I was not involved with Roswell, the most obvious case of that year, but I was very well schooled in the case of Kenneth Arnold and what he encountered in his airplane in the spring of that year. That is, in fact, what led to the use of the term flying saucer, as he observed how they skipped over the water in a saucer type of pattern. In the months afterwards, there had been a whole rash of sightings all over the country, and it had begun.
Were you a skeptic back then?
I was just an astronomer then, hardly what we call UFOologist in today's jargon. And yes, I was a total skeptic, thinking that it was all wives' tale type of nonsense and stories from hillbillies who had a bit too much moonshine. It wasn't until much later that my eyes would be opened on the matter.
So how did you get involved?
I was recruited by the Air Force to work on Project Sign and then Project Blue Book a few years later. 3 men from the Air Force just came up to my office. No, they weren't dressed in black, and offered me a job. It sounded like fun, plus it would give me access to some classified information. I thought, why the heck not? The Air Force expected me to use my expertise at debunking everything to the point of ridicule. It always had to be swamp gas, Venus, Jupiter, weather balloons, etc. Even in the cases where it was obviously none of the above. Now, about 85% of cases can be explained away with just with what I just mentioned. But I soon discovered that the other 15% had absolutely no explanation whatsoever, and that is what had to be examined more closely.
Did you end up having conflict with these officers who wanted to just reject UFO claims rather than investigate them?
Sure did, especially with that Major Quintilla. He would dismiss any report with a wave of his hand. If I were someone less high profile, the government would just have shut me down. So they brought in other so-called experts to debate me. But that only got the public more interested. In 1973, they put out the Condon report saying the subject of UFOs was dead. But apparently the phenomena in this area didn't get the memo.
So they never expected anything other than
They wouldn't admit anything unusual if a mothership flew 50 times down Fifth Avenue on Christmas Day.
So do you still work with Pierre Cherbourg?
He's working in Europe right now, but he did put forward a lot of ideas such as the interdimensional hypothesis, saying he hoped UFOs would be something even more interesting than just interplanetary visitors. Many UFOologists are still strictly believers in interplanetary travel, but that may change.
Professor Anik, how do you account for these creatures traversing the tremendous distance between the stars?
You are correct that these distances are absolutely enormous by human standards. If this coin in my hand, you see this sign in my hand? If this coin in my hand were to comprise our entire solar system, which is 36 billion times the size of the Earth, the whole continent we are on would be the size of the Milky Way. And that is only a small galaxy. And as for the number of stars, the expression billions and billions from the show Cosmos doesn't even begin to cover it. A small galaxy will contain hundreds of billions of stars, while larger galaxies can have hundreds of trillions of stars, not to mention literally quadrillions of planets. How does that make you feel? Small? So the question is valid that while there most certainly is life out there, can beings cross that great divide? Well, consider the progress we have made just in this century. In 1903, at Kitty Hawk, the Wright brothers were working with little more than a kite on a beach. Less than 7 decades later, we walked on the moon. Now imagine how much civilization can advance in, say, 700 million years. So, Agent Clancy, if the civilization is only 2 or 3 centuries older than ours, then no, I would say that they couldn't pull off such a feat. But for one that is multiple millions of years more advanced, it would seem entirely possible.
But what of those who say that this is not possible for any civilization, given the laws of physics?
Well, Agent Clemency, imagine two birds sitting on the Malibu beach in LA. Now, if they could conceptualize the distance to Waikiki Beach in Hawaii relative to their size, they most likely would conclude that creatures not born with wings could never make such an oceanic crossing. Yet we have flights from LAX to Honolulu every day and beyond. So for such advanced species traversing a group of local solar systems, that may not be that difficult a distance for them.
Is it safe to assume that the speed of light is truly the cosmic speed limit? That has been the conventional wisdom since before Einstein. While tremendously fast for creatures our size, it is remarkably slow paced considering the size of the universe.
That's a good question. The answer is not necessarily. The Big Bang occurred just shy of 14 billion years ago. If light speed were truly the limit to the expansion of the universe, then the universe would be no more than 14 billion light years across. Yet it is immensely bigger than that, and probably infinite. Just the part of the universe that is observable from our vantage point is over 6 times that size. And the observable universe is but a tiny speck in the grand scheme of the cosmos. So yes, all the data does indicate that there could be forces and speeds in the universe far greater than light. The question is, how could a super advanced civilization harness that power for deep space travel? Had they been able to use so-called wormholes and create some sort of shortcut across the universe? We may never know that answer to that, but it is a possibility well worth pondering, as we don't know any of the secrets of these other civilizations.
What are the biggest myths, in your opinion, about UFOs?
I can give you 7 of them. 1, UFOs reported only by UFO buffs. In fact, just the opposite is the case. The most puzzling reports usually come from people who have given little or no thought to UFOs. 2, UFOs are reported by unreliable, unstable, or uneducated people. Yes, this is sometimes true, but far more often they are reported by very reliable people, very reliable, stable, and educated people like pilots, astronauts, and police officers. 3, UFOs are never reported by scientifically trained people. This is unequivocally false. Some of the very best coherent reports come from scientifically trained people. It is true, though, that scientists are afraid to make public reports, either because they fear ridicule from the media, or more importantly, they might face a loss of research funding, which is essential to keep their jobs. Number 4, UFOs are never seen at close range and are always reported vaguely. When we speak of the body of puzzling reports, we exclude those that fit the above description. 5, UFO reports are often copycat affairs generated by publicity given to earlier reports. One cannot deny that this could be true when they are widely publicized, but it is unwarranted to assert that this is the sole cause of high incidence of reports. Many reports come from people who never even heard of UFOs before. 6, the Air Force has no evidence that UFOs are extraterrestrial or represent advanced technology of any kind. This is a true statement, but widely interpreted to mean that there is evidence against the 2 hypotheses. The absence of evidence doesn't imply that there is evidence or absence. As long as they are unidentified, the question must remain open. And 7, UFOs have never been sighted on radar or photographed by meteor or satellite tracking cameras. This is simply untrue. They have been tracked on radar and photographed many times, very often by naval pilots.
And have these same objections been with the cases?
Absolutely. Once again, there's a rush to explain things away and debunk these reports, even though they are very credible. In fact, these are some of the most well-documented and mysterious cases I've ever worked on.
As for young astronomers who are just starting out, is it a risk to their careers to express an openness to the possibility of the existence of UFOs?
Certainly. They are dependent on government funding. which could be cut off like a spigot by the powers that be that want to suppress information on UFOs.
Do you think many astronomers are closet believers in UFOs?
More than we will ever know. And pilots too. They just don't want to be called in for psychiatric exams that the FAA requires of any pilot making such reports. It's a vast conspiracy of silence.
I would like to ask you about the spacecraft themselves. Some people believe these are just top secret government craft of earthly origin, rather than anything from some other world. Any thoughts on that?
Well, for one, if these aircrafts that are government or any other government on this planet are trying to keep top secret, why in the world would they fly them over suburban houses for all to see? And not just to test them on remote areas of the planet where they likely wouldn't be seen by civilians. If any major nation had some technology like this, they'd use it for something more productive than flying over areas like Oak Bush. Consider the moon landing of just a decade and a half ago. Why would they ever have used antiquated fossil fuels to get up there? If they had some better technology like electromagnetic propulsion.
That's a good point. I never even thought of that.
Well, it's worth thinking about. It took 3 whole days for us to get to the moon, but if we were capable of anything approaching light speed, that trip would only be a second and a half. 250,000 miles, our trip to the moon is the greatest distance humans have ever gone. Yet, if you were to scale a single light year down to only mile or 1/6 trillionth of the scale to scale, we only traveled 1/400th of an inch. So yes, these UFO technologies that people have seen appear to be far more suited to traversing the tremendous distance between the stars rather than flying around the Earth.
All these points are fascinating, mind-boggling actually. But I have to ask you about something a little bit more basic. What is your professional opinion of Emmett Brockman?
Anik is taken aback slightly, but nonchalantly reaches for his pipe as he leans back in his chair. He digs into his pouch, fills it, packs the tobacco down, then grabs a match. After striking the match, he carefully lights his pipe and puffs.
He's an odd bird, that one. There's no denying that, but I've worked with a lot of eccentric researchers and scientists before. And he is a man who was far more immersed in Hudson Valley UFO cases and history than I was. That's why he is co-authoring Evening Invasion. He's quite a storyteller, no doubt about that. Sometimes those stories are entertaining, sometimes they are tiresome and just nonsensical.
So did you have any disagreement with him on the content of Evening Invasion?
Yes, indeed. He wanted to fill the book with all kinds of alien abduction stories, psychic phenomena, shapeshifters, tales of genies coming through other dimensions to visit people at night, and a lot of what he referred to as high strangeness. The last thing we need was an unconventional book like this to attract lunatics. So I struck all of that from the manuscript. When I told him that, he angrily mumbled something about saving it for future books. Well, good luck with that. But it's not happening on my watch. Yes, there is indeed some high strangeness going on with that fellow.
Did he mention anything about stone chambers in this area?
Yes, and while I'm sure that that makes some fascinating history, it is not appropriate for this book. From what I have heard from historians, they are root cellars built in the colonial era or perhaps considerably earlier. Anyway, I don't think there's any connection at all between structures in this area and the UFOs themselves.
What do you think of his academic credentials?
I never really checked out his credentials. I assume the school he taught had done that. He comes highly recommended by the school, Wilson Prep. The place does have a very good reputation. I know it's a school mostly of the children of wealthy people, but in the past it's had some wild kids and discipline problems. But recently they've improved immensely, winning the award for best science program in the state. They're recruiting some very talented students, so I'm not giving all the credit to Brockman. In any case, they're on their way to being one of the best science high schools in the Northeast.
What is the most unusual thing Brockman told you?
One evening, I opened up a very old and expensive bottle of cognac that I had gotten as a gift from Pierre Scherberg. Brockman not usually drink, but boy, he was putting it away that night. We didn't dare let him drive. Anyway, after consuming about a gallon of the stuff, he began to ramble about the base under the ground around here, from which the airships could be launched. When we asked how he knew this, he mumbled something about knowing it from the chambers. We took the bottle away and cut him off after that, but he soon passed out, and he didn't have any memory of it in the morning. That's one case that I would just attribute to alcohol. If he had said all of this when he was sober, I would have had him carted off to Wingdale.
What's Wingdale?
Oh, well, it's an old hospital for the insane up in Dutchess County. Actually, it's closed now, but Brockman is into ghosts and all sorts of things like that. He'd probably fit in there just fine.
Well, other than Wingdale, where could we find him?
He likes to have very early morning breakfast on the final Sunday of the month. Don't ask me why. At this greasy spoon way up in the sticks, aptly named Out of the Way. And I have to warn you, he's quite grumpy in the morning.
We'll check it out. But before we go, I have to ask you, what's it like being a movie star?
You went up a little too far with the script. I can't see with the...
Okay.
There we go. Well, I would hardly call myself a movie star. Of course, I did have a fun cameo in The Great Encounter. I hadn't acted since elementary school. Steve Stromberger hired me to be his technical assistant, and to be honest, I think I could have been paid a lot more for my work. I did a lot of work advising him on the film, and I wouldn't mind doing more of that in the future.
It has been a pleasure, Dr. Anik. Any man who is a friend of my father's is a friend of mine.
Likewise.
They shake hands. It is just after daybreak in a very remote area of the Hudson Valley. Beckett and Clancy have driven to the parking lot of the diner they were told about. Nobody seems to be around except for the workers at the diner.
It's hard to believe that we're still in the 1980s up here. This diner looks more like what you would have seen back in the 1930s.
Tell me about it. From the weird stories I've heard about this guy so far, it does sound like the type of place he would go to. I shudder to think of this guy's personal life. Based on what that former student told me about him, I wouldn't be surprised if Brockman's significant other is a blow-up doll.
Well, if his wife is a blow-up doll, you might want to avoid any pointed questions.
Laughter ensues.
You're agreeing, Clancy.
And he supposedly received a PhD from MIT.
I'm thinking more likely he contracted an STD in a bad part of NYC.
Just then, a small man walks out of the diner. He has a roundish face with a mustache. Though a few decades younger than his partner, Anik, he looks older and has a rodent-like quality. He is wearing a Harvard sweatshirt. His jittery quality suggests he's had too much coffee, though he looks like he might have been consuming something more potent. He stops briefly to pick his teeth and blow his nose.
Speaking of the devil, I believe that's him.
Stay in the car, Clancy. I think this guy may be dangerous.
Oh, please. Will you cut this macho man protect the little woman stuff? After the training I had at Quantico, a twerp like him wouldn't pose much of a challenge.
Yeah, I know. You're Wonder Woman. Anyway, there are things I want to talk to him about. Having the two of us interrogate him might freak him out.
Beckett exits the car and walks across the lot towards the unusual man.
Excuse me, Mr. Brockman?
Brockman had been looking at a handkerchief he was using, but then he looks back up at Beckett.
That's Dr. Brockman to you.
Well, I know that's what you like to be called.
I don't talk to the press.
Don't talk to the press. You could have fooled me with all those radio talk shows that you do. Anyway, I'm hardly the press.
FBI, that's even worse. I want a lawyer.
Why would you need a lawyer? I haven't charged you with anything. In any case, I remember hearing you on a talk show a few nights back. You didn't seem too big on lawyers back then.
You've been listening in on me? What sort of deal is this?
Well, it isn't like we were wiretapping you or anything like that. If you don't want people to hear what you're saying, why do you go on the radio?
Petty bureaucrats like you are always trying to make me look bad, trying to make a bad soap opera out of my work.
Well, I think you're making a bad soap opera out of this all on your own. Anyway, I want to talk to you about Dr. Anik and how you came to know him.
I don't talk about my work.
Yeah, except on the talk show circuit. That's a nice sweatshirt you're wearing, Mr. Brockman. Tell me, did you get your degree at Harvard before or after the School of Hard Knocks?
What have you been doing? Walking around the school where I teach, asking the kids I taught a lot of leading questions. You guys will sink to any level to discredit people who do research on things you can't understand.
If you're talking about UFOs, I do take that research very seriously. Unfortunately, there are a lot of fakers in that field. You're not one of them, are you?
You're crazy.
The way you're acting, you're the one who looks crazy, not me. You say you were a Vietnam veteran. I hope you know that stolen valor is a federal crime, punishable by 6 months in jail. And it's not a very good idea either to brag to minors about carrying a handgun without a concealed carry permit.
Pushy bastards like you give the Bureau a bad name. Now get the hell away from me.
He then starts to push his two index fingers into Beckett's chest. Beckett quickly slaps them away.
Assaulting a federal agent? Seriously?
I'll show you some assault.
Brockman winds up and throws a very wide and uncoordinated punch at Beckett's head. Beckett blocks the punch and hits Brockman with a hard strike to the solar plexus. Brockman doubles up and Beckett follows up with a knee to the gut. Brockman is whimpering but reaches out for Beckett's throat. Beckett grabs Brockman's right hand and wrist locks it, bringing him to the ground. Beckett looks at Brockman angrily. The latter man continues to whimper.
Not so tough, huh? Special Forces? College wrestling champion? I don't think so.
At this point, a nervous Clancy exits the car and runs over.
Beckett, that's enough. Don't get carried away.
Beckett ignores her and exerts more pressure on Brockman's arm.
Now, is there something you would like to tell me after all?
Okay. Just go to the stone chambers off of Route 300 after midnight, 2 nights from now. That's when the government uses the underground opening to their base. They only do it late at night. I'm telling you, just go there after midnight and you'll see. 2 nights from now is when it'll be opening up.
Beckett, please.
Beckett releases Brockman's arm and pulls him up off the ground.
You're pathetic. Not exactly the big badass of the Hudson Valley. All right, we'll check out your lead, but in the meantime, don't leave the area. If you're lying to me or if you flee, I'll come after you with everything the Bureau has got.
Yes, it's the truth. I swear I won't go far.
Now get out of here before I change my mind.
Brockman exits.
Well, I'm glad you let him go. Nothing you would charge him would hold him up in a court after the way you treated him.
Are you forgetting something? He assaulted me. I was just responding to that. He's a head case for sure, but I think he may be onto something. Let's go back and get ready. I suspect we have a few long nights ahead of us.
Interior Dark Government Office. The young agent whom we saw earlier enters to address Wentworth, who is smoking.
Yes, what is it? Yes.
Well, who's the young agent? Whoever wants to take that.
That was me. Beckett and Clancy are on us. They spoke to some people in town, the 2 police chief and Dr. Anik.
Well, that's impressive. Anik doesn't grant interviews to everyone, but he knew Beckett's father.
Then they got to Brockman, and it appears that the little weasel squealed. That weirdo snooped endlessly around the Hudson Hills, just south of the stone chambers. My guess is he knows about the entrance to the base, and God knows what else. If he spoke to the dynamic duo about it, then he'll probably get to it within 48 hours.
Holy shit. Let's get to the Hudson Valley. Now.
Beckett is in the car alone, talking on a brick-sized cell phone with Ted Smith. He's parked.
I'm telling you, Ted, something very big is going down here. Get a team of your best men here 2 nights from now.
This Brockman character is supposed to be full-blown crazy. You sure you believe him?
He is full-blown crazy. I can attest to that personally. But on this one, the broken clock appears to be telling the right time. I have no idea how, but he may know something we don't.
Okay, I'll assemble the team for tomorrow evening.
And as for the crazy part, that's another stone I don't want to leave unturned. Speak to that judge you know right away and have him put through a search warrant fast. Whatever rat hole this Brockman lives in, I want it searched and searched thoroughly. Knowing him, he's got something hidden in whatever chamber of horrors he dwells in.
Will do.
But before that, I have to check out the local library.
Okay, see you soon.
Beckett hangs up and exits the car. He walks across the lot to a local library. The library is on a very scenic lake, and the morning sun is beginning to break through the clouds. Interior library. A young librarian with glasses greets Beckett.
Hi, I'm Lori. Welcome to Oak Bush Public Library. How can I help you?
I'm researching some local history of this area. Do you have any books on the town itself or perhaps the county?
Sure, this way.
Also, I'm a big hiker. Do you have any maps of the trails that go north from Route 300 beyond the fire tower?
Oh, I know the trails well. That's where my dad would take me hiking in the summer when I was a preteen. But those trails were closed off about a year ago. Some federal agents came in and confiscated all our maps of that area.
Really? I hadn't heard about the trails being closed.
Flyers were posted all around saying that the closures were due to a chemical spill and that nobody should go up there. The funny thing is that no such story of a chemical spill was ever on the news. Weird, huh?
Very.
But the people still go up to that general area, especially near that awesome Buddhist monastery they built and the old Indian powwow grounds. You just can't go into the deep woods.
Interesting.
Is there anything else I can help you with?
Yes, if possible, I would like to use the microfilm machine and look at the local papers from 1965 to 1970.
Coming right up.
Beckett then spends the next hour or so perusing the files, apparently thinking there's something there that he has been missing. The screen reads, September 1967, local chambers desecrated by Fahey and her followers. They believe link to other world is there. Just then, Lori approaches him from behind.
Excuse me, sir. A tall, older-looking man just came in and told me to deliver this note to you. He then left in quite a hurry.
Beckett opens the note and reads it. Meet me on the pedestrian bridge over the Hudson River tonight at midnight, Wentworth. Hotel room where Beckett and Clancy are talking.
How did you do in marksmanship the last time you were down in Flanico?
100%, both on handguns and long guns. But this sounds like you're planning something dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous, but we won't find out a thing if we don't try this. I have to do this, and I have a special backup job for you.
Backup? Who do you think I am, June Cleaver? Come on, Beckett, get with the program.
It may be backup, but it's an important job. My life may depend on you doing it right.
What do you want me to do?
Use your marksmanship skills.
What?
I'm going to be meeting Wentworth on the pedestrian bridge over the Hudson River. I want you to cover me.
You want me up on the bridge too?
No, there's a wooden embankment on the east side of the river that's thick with foliage. Hundreds of years ago, the Indians would wait there and ambush people traveling along the river. It provides perfect cover. You can hide out there for hours without being seen. And you'll have the new sniper rifle with infrared telescopic scope that Smith gave us.
You want me to shoot Wentworth?
Not unless it's absolutely necessary. We need Wentworth alive for now. But if he makes any attempt on my life, when I'm talking to him on the bridge, you take the SOB out. It's one of the longest pedestrian bridges on Earth, but you shouldn't have any trouble at all shooting accurately from that range.
I don't like this, but I'll stick with your plan.
Late night, Beckett walks onto an enormous pedestrian bridge. There was some cloud cover early in the evening, but the fog has lifted, revealing a very beautiful and starry night. Despite the lateness of the hour, there are some lights showing along both shores of the river. Beckett continues walking to the center of the bridge. Wentworth, a very ominous-looking older man in a gray overcoat, is peering over the edge of the bridge.
You know, when the fog lifts here, you can see all the way down the valley to the Tappan Zee Bridge. On a very clear night with good binoculars, you can even catch Manhattan and its skyline. And to the north, you might even see a glimmer from the state capitol in Albany. It almost feels like you can see forever.
I can see through you a lot more easily.
You don't mind if I smoke?
As a matter of fact, I do mind, but not as much as I mind you trying these insane reverse engineering and genetic tests at the base of these hills. And all because the area's chemical composition and geophysical qualities suit your purposes.
I haven't hurt anyone.
Look, this is a densely populated and peaceful civilian area. The people here should be left undisturbed, with the only aircraft overhead being terrestrial in origin. The fact that Indian Point is around here is bad enough. The last thing they need is your mad science invading the airspace of this region, and using hoaxer flights of ultralights can only keep the people fooled for so long.
Well, I guess you've been talking to Mr. or should I say Dr. Brockman. Are you one to believe his tall tales?
In general, no. But any dirt he has on you, I'm willing to listen and listen well. He may be a liar on some things, but not everything. And I have more respect for him than I have for you.
Oh, Beckett, you are so much like your father. If only you had the vision to appreciate my plans rather than worrying about the wretched public. Yes, my work has made me unpopular, and I must admit I've had trouble recruiting top talent since the late 1940s. No luck with Anik or anyone like him.
Anik is a respectable scholar who doesn't want to see science misused. Bully for him for knowing a con man when he sees one. Guess he didn't want to work with any of those second-tier scientists you signed up after other agencies got their pick of the ex-Nazis like von Braun.
Well, how about you, Beckett? Maybe you'd like to come work for us for the right price. What if I could offer you a handsome price for coming on board with us tonight? We're talking, say, 7 figures.
And become the ethical equivalent of Dr. Mangala? No, I think I would rather lick the toilets at the out-of-the-way diner. You can stick your 7 figures in the nearest electrical socket.
You are trying my patience, Beckett. What if I say I could have you eliminated at this very instant?
I would say 2 can play that game.
You always were a real piece of work, Beckett.
And you always were a real piece of something else. All I have to say is quite clear. Your entire operation here is finished, and that's non-negotiable. Get your insane false science base to Hudson Valley, or I'll come at you full force. This meeting is over. Don't follow me unless you want a cold swim in the Hudson.
Beckett backs away without turning his back until he is a considerable distance from Wentworth. Wentworth just stands in the moonlight, looking down at the river. Exterior, the woods near the stone chambers the following night, around the same hour. Smith has arrived with a team of at least 24 fully armed with long guns and body armor. Beckett is waiting for him.
Oh, Jeff.
This had better be good, Beckett, with me bringing this kind of resources and manpower up here.
Oh, it should be good, all right. If the lead is correct, we should find some strange things this evening.
In other news, I managed to get a search warrant on Brockman through our favorite judge. We'll be doing an early morning raid on his house.
Excellent. I'm sure you'll find all sorts of goodies there, though not exactly the kind you'd want to give out to trick-or-treaters.
Hard to believe this is all taking place on Halloween night.
This is the Hudson Valley, my friend, the old stomping ground of Washington Irving. Here, every night is Halloween.
The 2 men remove their guns from their holsters, and the team starts to move into the woods. Pass a few stone structures until they see a depression in the hills. There is a large opening in the ground, which appears to be getting larger. A light source becomes more prominent as the ground opens up.
Jesus, is anything ever normal up here?
Nope.
Just then, 2 huge balls of light fly out of the portal.
What the hell was that?
After the balls of light have left, Smith and Beckett see a stairway going down into the opening in the terrain. The team enters and sees a massive web of corridors below. It is obviously some sort of base. Smith and Beckett walk down a corridor that leads to a huge hangar. A small craft is inside it.
Wentworth's men have been flying these around populated areas?
Yes, I'm afraid so.
They walk further down and see some 6-foot glass tanks with fluid in them. One contains what appears to be the grayish remains of an alien life form. The other seems to be some sort of genetic crossbreed with both human and alien features.
Good Lord, is that what I think it is?
I'm afraid so. Wentworth thought he could create super soldiers out of this genetic concoction and mass produce it for his own personal army.
That old man is as sick a puppy as they come.
I told them he never should work in any government agency.
One day I ought to have my men take him out.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Do the world a favor.
They walk further around the facility.
I'll have my men clean out the rest of this. Right now, I just have to get some air before I puke.
I'll take it from here. Get some rest before your raid on Brockman's place tomorrow morning.
Hotel room the following afternoon. Beckett is on the telephone.
Thanks again for your help, Gateman. Your suspicions were correct.
No problem, Beckett. Until the next time.
He hangs up and Clancy walks in.
That base is pretty sick. Too bad Wentworth wasn't there when we raided. Hopefully we'll get him some. In the meantime, I guess we'll just have to watch the skies. How about Brockman?
There was a full-scale raid on his place a few hours ago. He was in tears as they arrested him. I guess that's the way he acts when he's under any pressure. Underneath all his fireworks and bravado, there's just a scared little man behind the curtain, sort of like the Wizard of Oz. But he certainly wasn't harmless. We found C4 in his garage, along with some other kinds of plastique we never seen before, along with detailed maps of the hills.
What do you think he was up to?
It's hard to say, but he apparently had some big plans. Guess he wasn't content to just spray paint the chambers like the last nut. I think Brockman was going to blow the whole area to kingdom come.
So where's he at now?
At the moment, he's being held in the Westchester County Jail down in Valhalla. Tomorrow, they're going to ship him out to Westerly for a full battery of psychological tests and analysis. It'll be a while before we get another crack at him. You remember Westerly, don't you? We had some interesting cases that got sent out there.
Yes, I remember. But what's going to happen with Evening Invasion, the book that Brockman wrote with Anik?
It's been released without Brockman's name on it. There was just too much media buildup and too much money invested in it by the publishing house for it to be canceled. There have been huge lines of people eager to get a copy of it at bookstores all the way from Manhattan to LA.
What about Dr. Anik?
He's gone back to the Yerkes Observatory. That was always where he was the most happy. So it's logical that where he'll live out the rest of his days, semi-retired and far away from kooks and frauds like Brockman.
I could use a vacation myself, where I just lie on a beach.
That'll have to wait. There are reports that a Libyan terrorist group may be in the US, and we have to get cracking on that.
Oh, great.
No rest for the weary, which is why we are always caffeinated.
Okay, we can get on the road now. But first, a quick stop at my friend Jack's motorcycle store. Gotta stay caffeinated if we have to deal with foreign terrorists now. I'll buy you a great cup of coffee there.
Buy it. The coffee there is free, Beckett.
You catch on quick, Clancy. That's what makes it great.
You are such a cheapo.
Guilty as charged.
There is a brief pause as they prepare to exit the hotel room.
Say, Beckett, do you believe the people of the Hudson Valley will have to face any craziness like this in the future?
I hope not. Let's just say I want to believe that.
They leave the hotel room. Clancy walks ahead a bit. Beckett briefly stops and looks skyward for a few seconds, then moves on. A large sign reads Westerly Valley Sanitarium. Brockman is in a straitjacket, aggressively struggling with two young orderlies.
I'm telling you, there are spacecraft under the Hudson Hills. They're in a base there.
After a brief struggle, he is flat on his back in this room. A middle-aged doctor appears and is approached by one of the young orderlies. We don't have anyone for orderly, right?
Okay.
I can do that part.
Sure.
This one is maybe the worst I've seen, Dr. Kirkbride. Believe it or not, this guy was a suburban school teacher and author. He had a ton of explosives in his house and was planning on blowing up a historic venue in upstate New York. Kirkbride?
Tom.
Who's Kirkbride?
Tom.
I can take it.
Okay.
It's a shame we can't cure people like him. For now, the best we can do is just treat the symptoms and alleviate their suffering a bit. Let's start him on Thorazine, 200 milligrams to begin.
Yes, sir.
You know, my great-great-grandfather built facilities like this one across the country in the 1800s. Back then, they were only just beginning to understand these matters, and now here we are in the late 20th century, and we still aren't even close to curing mental illnesses like Mr. Brockman's.
Well, we can only go with what we have at the time, sir.
Very true. Have a good night, Frank.
Good night, doctor. The two men walk away. We then see Wentworth entering the corridor, looking as sinister as ever. Lights fade. The end.